Catus Maximus here. Picked this up for pretty cheap. Actually, it was 18 bucks when I plugged it in and it made the sounds that it did. Managed to talk them down to 50% off, which is nice about thrift stores. Anyway, I'm sure the answer to this video, diagnosing a abnormal noise in a Milwaukee drill, is, at least in this unit, is the fact that it's just been beat up, had a hard life, and is basically used up. But it would be good for parts for me, so, you know, maybe some handle parts. Certainly the trigger beads, those things go out. This chuck's pretty used, so I thought if I could get it at least be a little bit more cooperative, I may use it as a beater drill or give it to a friend or something like that. To give you an idea, you know, even though this is a 1/4 inch, this is the way these drills should sound like when they're in good operating condition. And voila, now we have this one. That's a really strange sound. It's either like brushes that are really worn or just some terribly worn gears. If we put it in reverse, it's even worse. Sounds like there's almost rocks in the gearbox, so it sounds like it's pretty worn. I noticed that there's Phillips head screws when they should be torqued, so obviously like those screws got loose. It may have been used with the gearbox being loose, and that will destroy gears in no time. And I suspect that's really going to be the answer here, but that high-pitched sound, you know, usually indicates like a really bad bearing or brushes that are just totally worn out. So let's take a look inside this unit. I guess we'll just knock this back handle off and take a look at the brushes first. So it's just super simple, 3 screws. All T20s. This handle has a bit of whatever that is. I don't think that's expanding foam, but it's some type of construction adhesive, and I'm going to have to get a flathead. Let's see if we can't get this thing to... There we go. That adhesive all along here is going to make it kind of an adventure to... There we go. Pretty stuck down there. Try to work our way along the seam without dinging it up too much, which is oftentimes easier said than done. Definitely is cruddy. There's our anti-shoplifting tag that they put inside tools now, because that's how bad it's gotten. Well, what we can see here is that there's plenty of life left in those brushes. The wire, see how there's this groove in the brush guide? So when the brush wears out, the wire hangs up on the bottom of the groove to prevent the brush from going all the way down, actually having the wire or the spring contact the commutator. But unfortunately, it seems like our big noise is with the front end, which is really bad news. If it was worn brushes, we could swap them out, and well, I got away with a good deal. They don't have a dedicated cord retention, it's just the handle itself. They do have a little copper plate off the trigger switch for the variable speed circuit to try to prevent it from burning out. 10 amp rated switch, but on an 8 amp motor. I mean, at least it is overrated to a degree, but not very much. Let's take a look at the front end, where apparently this noise is really coming from. Alright, got those screws out. I think these are just a little bit short for their replacement units. And we can see whenever they did their service that the gasket just kind of got messed up, and instead of being around the edge of the gearbox, it's fallen inside the gearbox, which is really pretty unfortunate. And yeah, it is gear wear. That's what appears to be what the problem is. Let's zoom in. But you can just see that there's like little nicks, really rough surface on this gear. The tips are really, really sharp, almost sharp enough to cut you. So there's been some pretty abnormal wear, and this happens when the gearbox rocks around. That gear that's supposed to be riding flat ends up rocking the one side and like will wear out the root, causes extra flakes of metal to build up. Then those get inside things like these little tiny, I don't know if you can see the needle rollers, you can see them in there. This is one of those needle bearings where there's nothing but rollers. I always like that. Milwaukee uses a lot of those. Particles get into there, really cause a lot of damage. That's a lot of damage. Isn't that what that flex tape person is? So generally speaking, you're not supposed to have gaskets just kind of floating around inside the gearbox. That's definitely bad news. So whoever put this back together just did it hastily. But, you know, these tools are kind of throwaway. If somebody had this tool for a year, probably, you know, and they paid $100 for it, probably paid itself off. And they just threw in some screws and then used it and then decided that it was getting too noisy and just replaced it. And this has had some severe impact loading. What I mean is this has had some type of drilling where, you know, either the gearbox was so loose that it broke, or they were drilling something, and, you know, it'd be like using a hand drill to run in lug nuts. It would just spin freely until that nut got tight, and it would just lock up and just jam. And you do not want to do that with drills, because that can just totally destroy them. And I know that was the case here. We actually have two alignment holes. We have a small one here. We have a larger one here, but you can see it's filled. So here's our little roll pin. The deal with alignment holes is it makes sure that this gearbox is clocked so it isn't twisted one way or another to maintain that gear alignment. It's very important. So obviously it hit something to where the lower post, you can see the broken metal there actually snapped off in the front half of the gear case. So really, I think this thing is just completely done. We'll pull out this reduction gear, take a close look at it. You can see that there's just a little bit of a flat on this reduction stage, so that looks okay. But you can see here that there's, let me clean this up just a little bit. But there's definitely some pretty uneven wear happening on this unit here. And I think that's where most of this noise is coming from. You can just see that there's some odd wear on the backside right on that leading edge. So a lot of the noise is just the fact that the gears, this drill was used for a significant amount of time with the gears in poor alignment. And when they finally fixed it, the gears had already been worn inappropriately, and so it's making a bunch of noise. Further evidence that it's just worn out. Look at this gear tooth. It actually, something got trapped under there, or maybe the gearbox got so loose it started to slip right on that tooth, but you can see its profile. It's gouged out. So this is something that technically it still does operate, but it has an unknown number of hours left on it. Obviously, if you were mixing like cements or that type of stuff, this thing may only have a few hours left. Home utility use, it could actually last a few years, even making all that noise. And I'm just realizing there were two alignment studs. There's one here, and there's one up here. And we can see that corresponds with that one there and there. So it actually broke both of these studs. So whatever happened here, this drill really just got, you know, pounded. Got hammered. And, you know, in these situations, you can't really say that it's a, you know, a crappy Chinese-made Milwaukee tool, because, you know, if you really abuse drills or use drills in abusive situations, you know, that's what's going to happen, even, you know, relatively powerful half-inch ones. If I can get zoomed out. And that's generally speaking, like why I own multiple drills. I own heavy drills because if I'm in a situation where I'm going to really be overstressing something like a smaller drill, having a really long mixing paddle coming out of it, puts a lot of stress on those three simple little screws. So I'll use a much heavier duty drill that's, you know, going to handle those situations. Secondly, it's nice to have, if you use drills or heavy duty, any type of drills, it's nice to have a backup, because that way you can have one where you use in more abusive situations, but it's not your only go-to unit. But surprisingly enough, even, you know, a drill like this, Magnum, heavy duty, if you really abuse it, it's going to have problems. The second thing is just these screws that they're using. Milwaukee should have much more plastic back here and have much longer and better gripping screws, so it has less chances of having these types of issues in the first place. Anyway, if you hear a funny sound like that, here, let me put these screws back in. Got those in. These holes are basically stripped. This is a situation where you're going to have to take a drill bit and actually drill all the way through and put in longer screws, so these never really will hold tight. I think I'm just going to put this outside with the free tag on it. Anyway, that's a video. When you hear noises like this, from a gearbox and a power tool, don't buy it. Anyway, really appreciate everybody who's been watching and subscribing. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. Until next time, Catus Maximus out.